This is Ambivalent Offenders, re-examining history's most infamous figures. Come with us and judge away. I'm going to talk about kind of what we hope to accomplish with this podcast, or what this podcast is about, because I think sometimes, again, when you hear the word offenders or villains or infamous, there's that certain connotation that comes with it. So our goal is to re-examine the various historical figures, and especially those ones, again, who have been vilified, who live in that gray area of history. Erin had mentioned that in a previous episode. So we aren't looking at people who've been vilified for a whole lot of good reasons. So those are the people we are re-examining. History's judged them rightfully. Those doors have been shut. We don't want to give away too much, but again, these are figures who typically were vilified in their time or later, sometimes due to rumors, political propaganda, or things go on and on. And so our goal is to look into these figures, who loom large and people are still debating about, and come up with, at the end, our own interpretations. And of course, wanting to connect with you and your viewpoints, right? That's part of this, is being able to share and be able to hear that, that kind of back and forth and discourse over those figures. So for me, this podcast actually came about connected to my own past. So I'm a former history teacher. I taught for 9 years, mostly in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And I was lucky enough to create my own elective, and I did what I called History's Greatest Villains on Trial, but it was a very similar thing. I used the term villains to appeal to people, of course. Our podcast, in a way, again, is placing them on trial, giving you those details of their lives and being able to sort it out in our brain. So a lot of times in my class, we wrestled with what we defined as a villain, and students sometimes, a lot of times think of that scale metaphor, right? The classic scale of, are they 50-50, right? 60% villain, 80% villain. So we wrestled a lot with that, and to kind of define if we would qualify them as a villain. So the class itself was a ton of fun. It definitely led to some pretty intense discussions and debates. And I mean, it really, in our podcast, you could boil it down to judging the hell out of some pretty interesting people.
We were really good at. I mean, we were born to do this thing, right? Honestly,
yes. I mean, we were the kids in 6th grade on vacation in San Diego watching a
David Starkey
reference. Although hashtag problematic now, but watching Six Wives of Henry VIII, and then ordering it. And for those what are they, Gen Zers?
It would be Gen Z, or Gen Z. It would be.
I'm so bad with the thing. That was before you could go on Amazon and know when you were getting it. It was I remember sitting at the stoop waiting to get this DVD set.
Multi DVD
antiquated.
I think we still have it somewhere.
I hope so. But that was certainly our kind of first foray into our love of history. And actually, I'm going to be talking to Erin. I'm tempted to do a Henry, especially we were talking about a movie that is coming out, Firebrand.
Yeah.
That's
about from Parr, his sixth wife. So that would be. I have at least one of Henry's wives, and Henry adjacent on my list, which I'll tell you later, because I don't want to give it away. But I do have some Tudor, obviously some Tudor people on the list of potential topics. So
I mean, now that he's going to be is played by Jude Law,
which spoiler alert, there's a Jude Law mention in my in the today's episode. So today is brought to you by Jude Law.
I guess.
Do you want to kick it off then, or should I kick it off then in terms of
Yeah, so
now
Erin,
that we mentioned?
yeah, so Erin will be taking kind of the reins of this episode. Another kind of thing about our format is we'll take turns, usually back and forth, but again, depending on life, that might not always be the case, but we'll take turns really taking the lead. So Erin is covering our figure this week. I have not read, and typically the idea is to not really.
I know you don't know much about this figure too,
Right.
so I'm wait. You're going to be you're going to be very fresh.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the last episode, Jamie decided to talk all about her favorite character, her favorite person from history, Nixon.
Richard
And
Nixon.
today, I'm actually going to be talking about. He is legitimately one of my favorite historical figures, John of Gaunt. So I'm not exactly coming to this unbiased, but that's not why you're coming to this podcast. So whatever. But I do think he's like a good example of a man whose reputation has gone through many changes throughout the centuries. He was reviled in his own time. He's been rehabilitated by virtue of being the founder of the Lancastrian dynasty. And he's even become a subject of his own romance novel. So,
ooh, sexy. Would you say historians have kind of a common agreement on kind of the vilification, or do you think is there still kind of some discourse?
I think there is a lot. I mean, we'll kind of get into why he was so reviled in his time. So we'll get into it later. But yeah, I think it kind of depends on what approach they're taking. So we'll learn about he's a villain in a very popular like populist uprising. So if you're taking the view of
it's either you're like, woo, you're a populist, you're like leading the charge like civil rights, or you're leading like a January 6th. Like,
yeah, we'll get to it. But I do think like I said, he's kind of had an up and down reputation, and I think people like me think that he's a very interesting guy. But I was talking about the subject as well to my husband Matt, who's also a history teacher. For those who don't know, what?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But I call this like the medieval man problem. Like, how do you approach a medieval guy and judge them? Because
they're all problematic.
They are all problematic, but especially so. I'm gonna start actually our story midway through because I'm gonna be literary and shit. So just let me do this.
I'll let you do that. And just to clarify, spoiler alert, my significant other is not a history teacher. We don't only associate with people.
No, but I hope you'll be listening to this, and hopefully he'll
shout out Eric. Hopefully you're listening. He said he was hopefully gonna not interrupt the podcast by texting, and I said it's okay. I'll just read your replies and to our millions of listeners. So be excited for that.
Okay, so
just kidding. He's watching a movie. He'll fall asleep on the couch. So go ahead.
At some point, he will be texting you as he listens to this, and he's going to be enthralled by we've got a lot of drama. This is, if you're here for the drama,
he does like some hot goss. So
okay, well, there's a lot of hot goss. So we're taking place in London. There's this beautiful Savoy Palace owned by the richest, most powerful man in the land, and dare I say, the hottest.
Ooh.
Sorry, that's my interjection. So this is John of Gaunt's palace, and it's in ruins, destroyed by an itinerant army of peasants. John of Gaunt is not home, luckily for him. He's in Scotland. But if he had been, What?
I said jealous.
Yeah. If he had been home, though, he would certainly have been killed. This is like a heads-on spike revolution right now. The Savoy Palace, however, is not so lucky. So the rebels are in there. They're tearing it apart like harpies, so much so that it actually never gets rebuilt. Even better, they found his amazing wine cellar. So they're down in the cellar, helping themselves to John of Gaunt's wine. So it's full on frat party down there. Suddenly, though, the cellar collapses and kills the 32 partying rebels. So
no.
we're setting the scene. We're setting the scene. So we're going to talk about what led to the event and why John of Gaunt was the subject of their ire. But I thought that was the perfect.
It is. I was trying to debate if I would rather, for a moment, I was like, would I rather be in Scotland or in that wine cellar? But you helped solve
Scotland.
that. You helped solve that.
Yeah. So we're going to go, obviously now we're going back to the beginning. So John of Gaunt, he was born in 1340. He's the son of Edward III of England and his wife Philippa of Hainault. So he's the third son out of a family that will eventually have 8 sons and 5 daughters.
Yikes.
Yeah. So we're like opposite of Henry VIII territory here. Yeah. So it's this like huge family that's gonna.
That's what I feel like always a problem. It's like you have to have this happy medium. You got to have a few spare sons,
but not.
Shout out to, I guess, not that I'm trying to promote Harry's spare. You need a spare heir, but you're also like, once you get into like the multiple
8 sons,
right? Then you're like, oh shit, we're all one of us at least is going to be murdered.
We will talk about there will be some hairy mentions because it's so it's a huge family. So this is why all those sons is what causes the War of the Roses, like in the next generation, because all the aristocracy is related to like multiple sons. So that causes an issue, but that's a topic for another day. But we're going to be thinking Prince Harry in this.
Too many men. Okay.
Yeah. So our main guy, John, his name always causes confusion. So I want to talk about that first. So Gaunt is actually it's less exciting than it sounds. It's just how the English pronounced Ghent back in the day, Ghent in Belgium. So his family or his parents were there fighting, spoiler alert, the 100 Years' War. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But
are they super wealthy? I mean, obviously they're in the aristocracy, but are they like?
No, his parents are the king and queen.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah. They are. They're the top. Yeah.
For a moment, my brain, I guess, just shut down. And was like,
So his birthplace is in Ghent. It does make for some fun wordplay in Shakespeare's plays, but there were some actually weird rumors about him, quote unquote, being a son of the Ghent butcher for some reason. But like, where was his mom going to be interacting with like a butcher?
She's just going down to the local market.
That's not how
I need a pound of sliced ham.
Yeah, that's not how queens worked back in the day. And to like considering how many freaking kids they had, like, you really think she's going to be looking for action outside of the marriage bed? No. So, but yeah, I think
it's either she's enjoying it already with what she's got, or she's like, there's nobody else touching me.
Yeah, I think I would be more like, oh my God, like, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 kids. Yeah, 13 kids.
Nope.
And I think that's just what we know of. Goodness knows, like I don't think that would even include like miscarriages and things like that. So, but I just want to give like a little context about his parents because it's important to know the world he's born into. So his father's like the greatest medieval king. He's kind of who you think of when you think of like chivalry and all that. He was obsessed with King Arthur, so he's the one who like founded the Order of the Garter, which actually was I just saw it was today, the day that we're recording in England. So kind of a perfect thing. It's like that. You see him in like the robes and like the big silly feathered hat. So like Charles and Camilla and William are all in that. So he does like that. He hosts a lot of like tournaments and obviously like the most English of pursuits is warring with the French. So this is where we get the the 100 Years War. So yeah, it's he begins the 100 Years War between England and France because of he's the only surviving grandson actually of the French king. So he actually has a good claim to the throne instead of a random cousin of the French king who ends up succeeding. But that's where we did it. Yeah, well, that's how they do the Salic laws because they didn't want the English on the French. They're like, oh no, yeah, oh, it's too bad that you're through your mother's line. No, we don't do that here in France. But actually, John of Gaunt, he gets involved in the 100 Years War in years to come, but he doesn't ever achieve like the same sort of success as we will meet his older brother, the oldest. He's the heir to the throne. You probably heard of the Black Prince, or at least it sounds familiar.
Sure.
Black Prince, maybe. Sure. He's Edward of Woodstock, so another Edward, yes, but not that Woodstock.
Different era.
Yeah, different era. So he's like Edward, the Black Prince, is like the firstborn son. He's famous or infamous for his reputation in war. So he was 16 in the Battle of Crécy, where he was like in the thick of it, and he almost got like killed, and they were gonna send like troops and stuff in to help him, and his dad, the king, was like, no, 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 let him earn his spurs. So like the medieval equivalent of throwing like the kid off the deep end.
Well, he's got a few extra sons, so
yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking. But he was the ultimate like big brother to look up to in terms of all things for our main guy John. So John of Gaunt actually fights alongside his famous older brother at the rifle. I'm gonna have you guess how old he is when he takes place in his first battle, which is a naval battle.
10.
Oh, you got it. He is, yeah, that's true.
I was trying to think of what age would I not want Henry?
Yes,
my son, to be. But I was like, well, it's a naval battle, so he might.
Oh my God, this is like very, very twin thing. Now everybody's gonna think we have like the weird.
Yeah.
Twin
no, I did not look it up. I was like literally trying to be like, okay, well, it has to be a young number, but and yeah, for some reason 8 sounded too young, and so I went with
10. He was in like the naval battle at the age of 10, but besides the 10 being 10 and being in a naval battle, his childhood was still pretty damn good in terms of like young princes, because well, one, his parents were actually like one of those rare medieval couples who loved each other. They were married at like 15, 16. They were thrown together at this like really tumultuous time when King Edward III's mother, Isabella, was actually trying to overthrow her husband. So Edward III's dad with her lover, Roger Mortimer. So she basically has this army that comes in and then places Edward III and Philippa, when they're teenagers, as like basically puppets, and she rules through them. But instead of tearing that couple apart, it seemed to strengthen their relationship, and like for up until the very, very end of Philippa's life, Edward never had mistresses. Like there's no 30 years. So they were happy, secure, and Philippa actually had the kids all with her. So like they didn't send them besides Black Prince, who, you know, they'd send out like the oldest.
Right.
The rest of the kids she like actually raised for the most part. So
Netflix,
yeah.
get on this. This is like
I know.
version.
I know. It's really, I mean, Isabella of France, who it would be John of Gaunt's grandma, she's on my list of people to do because, yeah, she's got a bit, like I said, it's like her against her husband. And so this all comes before John. But, you know, at this point, the family is very, I mean, it is like happy family, big family, but happy family.
But at war. I mean, not at war within themselves, but at war with.
Yeah. So Philippa, like when her husband Edward would go, you know, to fight during the Hundred Years' War, she'd always fought. Like even when she was pregnant, she would. I mean, that's why John of Ghent. That's like the front lines of the 100 Years' War. So she's giving birth on the front lines, basically. Or when she couldn't, she would give birth and then immediately hightail. Like, I mean, they never spent time apart. Like they were not one of those couples that like, you know, would see each other occasionally, but they were always together. But besides the 100 Years' War, the 1340s were like a fucking terrible time to live anywhere. Period, because of this thing we call the Black Death. So this isn't a Black Death podcast, so I don't want to go too much into detail. But if people don't know, obviously it's a worldwide pandemic, which sounds familiar, which had massive repercussions to social and economic spheres because of just the sheer amount of people it killed.
They say like
so obviously,
population.
yeah, so numbers vary, but like 30 to 50% of the European population, you know, and it spread elsewhere as well. So even the royal family too wasn't immune. So John's sister Joan, she died in 1348 at the age of 14 on the way to her wedding. So they hadn't realized it was coming and it hadn't hit England yet. And all of a sudden they had gotten to like the ports and they heard it and they tried to take care of her. But I think she was probably one of the first like English people who died.
The Black Death from the ports, because again, if you're not familiar, spread through rats.
Yeah, exactly. So but just to think of that, we're not immune to the royal family's not immune to the Black Death. But what concerns us here is I'm kind of just setting up is the working people. So those peasants in the fields, you know, there's now 10 of them. So they basically want to unionize and want higher wages. Right. And because they have a much higher, or because they have a smaller workforce, they can have that leverage. So I'm like, very
the rest of them are dead, so can I at least get paid like maybe
yeah, can I get like time and a half?
More PTO, please.
I am very much team peasant in this scenario, despite my love for John of Gaunt. But I just want to set this up because we are gonna come back.
Okay, so I'm on board. Peasants, they're like, okay, Billy and John are now dead, so I'm one guy. Three guys.
Billy, John, and all their family are dead, so there's 3 of us.
Right. So maybe a little more pay would be nice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Got it.
So we'll come back to our peasants in a bit, but just keep the situation in the back of your mind as we go through John's bio. Because just as our COVID-19 pandemic changed a lot of things in terms of what we'll accept in terms of workplace, so did the Black Death, and that's going to go in the background next decade or so of John's life. So we're just putting that out there right now. All this is happening. John does get married for the first time, although before he does, he fathers a illegitimate kid with one of his mom's ladies in waiting, which is like, that seems very like rite of passage for a young like princeling. Yeah. Like, yeah, but now
follow your papa's ways.
Yeah, but it's time to marry him off. So he marries his first wife, Blanche of Lancaster,
And
in
I don't like the
1369.
ominous first wife. The disclaimer first.
But this is a good one. They're the same age. They're both like he's 19, she's a little bit younger, but they're like both hot, rich.
Okay.
So this is a good match. They're very into each other. So and it brings him the really wealthy Duchy of Lancaster because Blanche is an heiress and she has no brothers. So he's got money.
Yep.
So they're hot, rich, really into each other. And then, so even if he's not going to be the next king because he has two brothers ahead of him, he's going to be like one of the, top guys in the land.
Right.
The Duke of Lancaster.
Yeah.
So just to note, in the future when we get to the War of the Roses, this is where you get the Lancastrian line. So when they say the Lancasters versus the Yorks, that's where we get it. So anyway, they have a happy marriage as much as we can tell. Geoffrey Chaucer, who's the scourge of many an English major, who's the writer of. You probably never had to do Canterbury Tales because you didn't do English.
We had to do like easier. Actually, like at my school, the seventh graders read passages from it.
Oh, did they? Well, I had to do it in college in the middle.
Right, you had to do it in the actual.
Yeah, where you had to read it out loud, like basically in a bad Irish accent. Like you can YouTube it and hear like what it sounds like, and it basically sounds like you're doing a weird Irish accent. So, anyway, so
I know him.
But he was like obsessed with. He like wrote poems about Blanche of Lancaster. Yeah, like really embarrassing for him. But she actually dies really young, so she pops out 7 kids by the age of 26.
And she got married at 19.
She was a little bit younger, so like I think like 17.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, but that's what I like. I put on my notes collective shriek. So their oldest son, Henry Bolingbroke, will end up on the English throne as Henry IV. But anyway, like before, people thought that she maybe died of like the Black Death. But it seems more likely that her body after like another childbirth was like,
God.
like I can't do it anymore.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
It must be through Henry's genetics with those parents, and then that poor Blanche didn't know what she was in for.
I know, like, oh my God, like like so, like that many before you're 26, and then like Philippa, John's mama, is like 13, 14 kids, like. Yeah, I can't even think. But anyway, so Blanche is dead. John's really sad, but he remarries in 1371, this time to Constance of Castile. Yeah. So obviously this is another political marriage, but this one in particular, we can see why he arranged it, because his new wife she had a claim to the throne of Castile. So he's going to spend like a huge amount of money, time.
If people aren't familiar, if you want to give, I mean, not even like a huge background, but like, where are we talking? Where is Castile?
Iberian Peninsula. So before Spain was unified, you have like Castile, you have Aragon, Portugal's in there. So they're
short little. So like near, we can say like modern day Spain, right?
Yeah, basically Spain. It's like a principality of Spain. So Constance. Yeah, Spain doesn't exist as we know it at this point. But Constance was, she should have had a claim, but as a woman, she had issues getting the throne. So he spends a lot of time and money getting the throne. for constant. So that's gonna
Baby,
start.
I love you. I'm gonna fight for you.
Yeah, that's gonna start feeding into his unpopularity. So this is like the Brits if like Prince if Harry was like trying to get a throne for himself. Like they've thrown enough of a fit. But imagine if he was trying to win a throne for himself. That's not a great look.
Yeah.
It just makes him look desperate for a throne. Like that he'll waste any amount of money and resources and lives to get it.
Yeah.
So, but right now he's just kind of proclaiming shit, but he'll actually go over there and start doing things later. But it's during this part of his second marriage is where we will introduce one Catherine Swinford, aka the woman who is named my husband could never remember, no matter how many times I've mentioned her. This is Matt. This is the bane of Matt's existence because I always mention, and he's always like, "Who is that?" So
Say it again for our listeners. Catherine
Swinford. So
Swinford.
Swinford, yeah. She is about 10 years
For
younger.
For Matt, it's like Anne from Arrested Development.
Yeah, she's about 10 years younger than John, and her dad actually came to court with John's mama, Queen Philippa. So she was in service. Catherine Swinford was in service to John's first wife, Blanche.
Okay.
The one with the shit ton of kids. And she was actually at her funeral, and it seems like after Blanche died, she stayed on to become like a governess to John of Gaunt's kids. So she had kids about she had kids about
this is a classic like celebrity and nanny.
This is what I told you, the Jude Law.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the Jude Law of it all. But so
that's an old. This is like that's a very old cultural reference. But for you millennials, you'll know.
Just Google Jude Law nanny. But yeah. Anyway, so Catherine, she's been in his orbit. She's like in the household with his first wife. She has kids a similar age, and then her husband dies, so she kind of needs
kids.
She doesn't have a ton of kids, like I think 2 or 3 with her first husband. So she continues to serve Constance, the wife number 2. Fun fact, also coming back to Chaucer, it's Catherine Swinford's sister, Philippa.
No, just
her sister Philippa is actually married to Chaucer.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's our Chaucer reference, but yeah, so this is the classic like husband banging the nanny situation. So I'm here for it.
You are here.
I am.
Why do we like this?
It's a really long-lasting relationship, so it'll go a couple decades, and it does produce for John a entirely new family. 4 kids, so they
we're cheering for the second family.
Yeah, Daddy's not so secret second family. So they're called the Beauforts, which yeah, you probably recognize because this is where you get the Tudors. So us Tudor girlies who will recognize Margaret Beaufort, which is Henry VIII's grandma, Henry VII's mom. She's a Beaufort. So this is where.
So maybe I'm into it. I'm not gonna give my like stamp of approval, but
we'll get into it. But I know normally I would say no, but he also actually he does recognize. So he's not hiding the kids. He's not like, where did these kids come from?
I guess.
So he is setting them up in life, and yeah, they do. The Beauforts do become a pretty big part of the aristocracy later on, but this is also where we get our romantic hero, John of Gaunt. So there's a 1950s popular romance novel about John and Catherine called Catherine. So I'll talk more about that later at the end.
So that's why you're a fan. That's why.
Of course, I've read it. So just for research.
Yeah.
No, this was a while. I read it a while ago, but back onto our like political side of things after going into like the relationships. So England was doing great during John of Gaunt's dad's like early reign, and now it's becoming a little bit of what the historians would call a hot mess during the 1370s. So this is where the Hundred Years' War is starting to go bad. So like the Black Prince's victories are kind of behind them. Queen Philippa, she's died, or she got really sick and then she died.
She's died.
She's died. But before she died, King Edward III, so this is John of Gaunt's daddy, he had taken up with his first known mistress. So you were talking about, I know,
Right on her deathbed.
Yeah, when she was sick. So yeah, he waited 30 years, and then right as she was sick, he takes up with a guess where he found her?
She's a nanny.
No, the other spot where they find them.
Oh, she's a lady in waiting.
Of course. Alice Paris. So she's.
I'm judging. I know we're not villainizing. We're deciding with.
This isn't about Edward, although Alice, his mistress, is on my list. She's on my list to do because she's really interesting. Like she has interesting things too.
But I'm judging Edward for waiting.
I know. Because she's also obviously much younger.
He's like, baby, I have my needs.
Yeah.
Your father has many children, so.
I know, and they do have. I think she has 3 kids. Alice Paris, the mistress, has 3 kids with him, and obviously she's much younger. But end of life crisis. But at this point, everybody so they kept it kind of on the down low when Philippa was alive, but as soon as she dies, like Alice is out there, and of course everybody hates her. So like if there's a woman that you can blame problems, people are like, oh, amazing. Like I don't have to blame the king, I can blame the woman.
Does she become queen, or is she just his?
No, that she's just like honest. He never marries her, but like she's around there and
open in public, yeah.
Yeah, so people love to hate a woman. Actually, to bring it back to our main guy, John of Gaunt, he actually seems to have had a pretty decent relationship with her, at least in terms of like they gave each other gifts and things like that. But this is just a really bad time for the royal family because also the king's health is starting to go downhill too. He actually suffers a couple strokes, which you can even see on his like effigy for his funeral effigy. Like it shows the impact of the stroke, how like it droops part of the face. And then at this point, so as the king was having the strokes, this is when you would expect the heir to start stepping up, but the Black Prince had actually been sick for a long time. He had gotten sick on one of his campaigns, so he's been sort of in his sick bed for a while, so he's not stepping up. So somehow John of Gaunt gets the blame because, his dad's ill and, at the end of his life.
The second son, is he dead?
I don't know if he's dead at this point, but he kind of is off doing his own thing. I think he is pretty famous in terms of he does a lot of like tournaments and stuff, so he's not I don't know if he's dead at this point. He does die before
John. So John's just kind of more of like
he's the guy who's there. So he's in England, he's sort of in the court, so John gets the blame for England falling off the rails because he's there. So, he's not the king, and people still love the Black Prince because he had all those victories in the 100 Years' War. So people they're not going to blame him because also he's sick at this point. So it's only going to get actually worse from here on out because like 1376, 1377, this is like an even worse stretch. So first in June, the Black Prince dies. He's only 45.
Okay.
So, like we had said, he'd been sick for years, probably of dysentery. Um, so he has kind of been out of the picture for a while in terms of he's been sick, but he's been groomed for the role. So this would be as like Prince William. It would be as if Prince William died now before Charles did.
Yeah.
So it's a big disaster. And then at this point, also, like a year later, John's father, King Edward III, he ends up dying. So at this point, it leaves the heir. So the new king is the Black Prince's eldest son, who is only 10 years old. So he becomes King Richard II. So yeah, child kings are never ideal. So we're in a bad place.
So yeah, who's his protector, quote unquote?
I don't think he actually has like an actual protector, but this is where John comes to the front. So this is where during the king's early reign, John's doing a lot of the stuff. I don't think he's actually like the protector, but he gets a lot of flack because he's really unpopular. So London hates him, other nobles hate him, and the common people hate him because he has what grandma would say would be a buku bucks. So obviously the common people hate him. So he's like seen as like he's a scapegoat because he's the adult in the room.
Okay.
So now we're going back to where we began at the beginning. We're at the peasants' revolt. So we're in the wine cellar. I told you we'd be back. So this is like it's a huge uprising. It's one of the biggest events in English history. It doesn't get a lot of play, I don't think, here in like.
This is when the boy is king, still king.
Yeah, so he's very young. So I don't want to get too into the weeds because you could do an entire podcast about like peasants' revolt. But so we're talking between labor shortages from the Black Death, higher taxes from the 100 Years' War. Like people are pissed. Like they want real change. So we already talked about John of Gaunt's basically running things because a kid king can't do that.
And John's like, I remember being 10 on that naval.
Yeah. Back in the day. But he does introduce the first poll tax in English history, which turns into 2 and 3. So, those always impact the lower classes. So
I was going to say, I'm sure that made him really popular.
Exactly. So this is why people hate him.
And any instituting of a tax is going to make you.
Yeah. Anytime you institute a tax, people aren't going to like you. And it's not just peasants either. So, it's called the Peasants' Revolt. But there's actually been a lot of work done recently about trying to find the actual peasants of the Peasant Revolt. And it is sort of the whole common. So it's not just the lowest of the low. It's it could be merchants and things like that. So it's the entire commons is involved at this point. So, and they're not against the idea of monarchy in itself or even the king. Basically, they're not trying to do a republic. What they are against is the abuses of the nobility, including our main man, John of Gaunt. So he's kind of their most hated person at this point.
Symbol of wealth and
So their slogan was "When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then a gentleman." So they're the nobles weren't they're not in the Bible. They're not we can put up with a king, but why are these corrupt aristocrats ruling us, basically? If that makes sense. So our peasants march into London, and it's bad enough that the king, who's at this point he's 14, and his mom, they go into the Tower of London, and the Archbishop of Canterbury is actually beheaded in London. Yeah, so he's beheaded by the mob. So this is really like mob justice. So eventually the king does meet with the rebels, including the leaders. There's like the main leader is called Wat Tyler. He hears their demands. One of their demands is like ending feudalism. And then when the rebels don't all go home after meeting with the king meets with them again. He's like, okay, well, let's talk about this again. And then actually, like, things get really chaotic, and their leader, Wat Tyler, is killed by one of the king's men. So then, so then the king, before like chaos reigns, um, 14-year-old Richard's like, he speaks to the rebels and he's like, guys, I'm going to be merciful. It's going to be fine. And all the rebels are like, we love you. Like, this preteen is amazing. But of course, can you guess what happens after? Like, he leaves, and then what happens after? You can take a guess.
Well, I'm sure they're still pissed.
Yeah, well, and there's a brutal suppression of the rebels.
Right.
So a lot of them are executed without trial. So this is like
right.
So the king.
Right.
So this is
self talk, being like, I'm gonna give you what you want. I just gotta go out here first.
That is basically what he does. Yeah. So obviously they're like pissed, but he's like, he gives like Joffrey from the OG Game of Thrones vibes. Like
why is he our villain?
What?
Yes, it seems like he's a villain.
Because he's like actually a villain. Like he's like he does get, spoiler alert. This would be John of Gaunt's nephew, King Richard II. He gets overthrown by John of Gaunt's son, who becomes Henry IV. Okay. So yeah. But anyway, this is
right now. So right now with the vilification, it's really just because John represents not royal like monarchy, but nobility and like like he spends.
He's the head honcho. He's the like out of all the dukes and stuff. I mean, he's basically running the government because his nephew's 14, right. And 14-year-olds can't be trusted with anything. Right. So he's the richest and most like visible guy in the land. So he's the scapegoat for
everybody's dying. Well, people are dying of them.
Yeah, so this is why they went to the Savoy Palace, because they don't like him. And there is some weird, like, London didn't like him because there's like some weird religious things, but we won't go into that. But anyway, this is where, like, if you're an anti-capitalist and want like a more detailed like stuff, like, I mean, obviously this is a really condensed view of the Peasants' Revolt. There's a book about the Peasants' Revolt by Dan Jones, who is actually David Starkey's like protege. So
there we go.
Yeah. But anyway, this is where we've got the Savoy Palace burned, much of London's in ruins. Again, very much me as like in my current state, very team peasant, but I do think John gets like a raw deal. So it's obviously a big wake up call for him. And he knows, like, next time he wouldn't get so lucky if things go that way. So he came into the Peasants' Revolt reviled, and it wouldn't help his reputation. So if we're talking about reputation, it was bad before, and then now, he's kind of at his worst reputation. This is, if you're, I want to do like a Taylor Swift reference, like insert Taylor Swift reputation.
Okay.
And one of the reasons he was so unpopular too is he was really visible with Catherine Swynford, his mistress, and was being too open with it. People are like, "Of course you're going to have your mistress. We all have our mistresses, but you hide your mistress. Yeah, you hide your mistress.
You wait 30 years until your wife's on her bed.
Yeah, on the deathbed. I know. But so this is where he does end up sort of putting aside Catherine. So he still supports like their kids and stuff, but it seems like at this point they stopped their romantic relationship, at least around this time, and he begins to focus on like his second marriage. So I do think this is where I'm like, I do think it's sad because I think all things considered, we can tell that she was the true love of his life. Considering, well, that's not the end of her, I'll say, spoiler alert, but considering, I mean,
he didn't have
they're
a choice. He didn't have a choice, and this is not. Yeah, this is not like his choice for who he gets to.
no, at least not from what we've. Yeah, it seemed like he thought like you know he had to do this like for duty
Right.
and all that. So, and I do think a lot of his. This is where, yeah, like if you're looking at his poor reputation, the Peasants' Revolt is a big part, and that's obviously a lot of debate about how corrupt he, is he more corrupt than any other like
Right.
nobleman at that time? Yeah, so there's a lot of questions there, and then this is also where he's put Catherine Swynford, his mistress, aside. Yeah, he's still supporting their kids. And then this is where he kind of turns to Castile and he starts to actually get even more involved. Wow. So his his nephew at this point is old enough to run England and begins to run England into the ground, but John's looking at Castile and it costs him like a lot of money, resources and stuff, and he never actually wins the crown um for Castile.
Or
What?
yeah, for his wife, yeah.
For his wife.
All he cared about, he wanted his wife to be
queen. Yeah, but he does have a daughter with Constance of Castile, and it's their daughter who actually, so as like a compromise, she marries into the Castilian royalty, and that's why Catherine of Aragon, who's, if people don't know, is Henry VIII's first wife. That's why she looked very English rose. It comes from that English side of the family. So it's his family who gives her that like very English rose. So yeah, he eventually gives up on the hope of reclaiming Castile, but yeah, it's only after spending like a small fortune, losing a chunk of his army, and not just to like that. I mean, I don't think there was like even a huge amount of battles. It was a lot of just disease and that kind of thing. And then this is where he kind of returns home a broken man at this point.
Well, and people, I'm sure people, again, people aren't like, oh, this is our land, we want back. Like it's, I can't imagine it being, popular.
No, so this is where, again, this is if Harry was, trying to go off and have his own throne, people would be like, okay, well, you're just trying to find, whatever throne.
I'll take Spain, yeah. He's like, he wants to do it for Meghan.
Yeah, for Meghan, definitely. But yeah, but at this point, I mean, he still has some living left to do, and this is where a familiar face comes back into his life. So this is where we're going to cue the swelling romantic music. This is where Catherine Swynford returns. Giving like the Notebook. What?
No, said her.
No, this is giving like the Notebook or something like in medieval times.
Back. Reunite.
I really invested in this like really centuries old romance. So they end up marrying in 1396. So his second wife died in 1394. So 2 years later, him and Catherine marry. So she's his third wife. And with that, they're able to legitimize their children. So the Beauforts. And that's what some people think they only married just like at the end of their life to legitimize their kids and give them a better chance at things. But I find it unlikely that there wasn't something, like love or, considering how long lasting. I mean, it's over the course of like decades at this point that they've been together.
Okay, I'll give them some romance.
Yeah, it's giving Charles and Camilla vibes.
Oh, let's don't compare that.
Well, I know. I know. Well, that's why I'm like, if but this is like Catherine's not leaking stories about her stepchildren, so
Okay.
we will say that.
Okay.
Hashtag justice for Megan.
Okay, got it.
But it is kind of like where it's like they've been in each other's lives for at least 2, maybe 3 decades at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and then but at this point, like it's exciting for them, but things are going to get a little bit more complicated because just 2 years after, or wait, it's oh yeah, 2 years after they're married, John's eldest son by Blanche, so like his eldest son by his first wife Henry, because they're all like Henry Edwards. So Henry Bolingbroke is what we call him. He's exiled by King Richard, so he's still the young king. He's grown up, but now he's become a tyrant.
Okay.
And he exiles his this would be his cousin. So obviously that's John's heir. So John's upset, and there's a lot of heartbreak for him at this point, especially since he doesn't have long to live. So John of Gaunt, son of a king, would be Castilian king himself and constant supporter of the crown. He dies in 1399 at age 58. And so when he dies, it's actually his nephew, still the same king, Richard. He disinherits John's son Henry, who's still in exile. And so this would be a huge deal because John's like one of the richest, if not the richest person in the land. So that means like his estates are going to go to the crown instead of So
so not even to like his next in line.
Nope. No, it'd be like completely disinherit. So this is where we will eventually see that.
Yeah, I want to learn more about this evil child king.
Yeah, but anyway. But to go back, Catherine Swynford, so she only outlives John by a few years. She died in 1303. But Catherine and John's legacy lives forever because every king and queen since 1485, which is when the Tudors got on the throne, they've all been descended from John and Catherine, the Beauforts. And then and then before that, John's legitimate line was on the throne. So basically, after he dies, like I said, his son's in exile, and then his son, Henry Bolingbroke, comes back to England and overthrows the bad King Richard, and becomes his own. That's where it starts the Lancastrian line of kings. So Daddy's first and second family go on to do remarkable things. So that's what this is an aside, but there was just the Shakespearean history plays in Minneapolis at the Guthrie. That's what so Richard II is about John of Gaunt at the beginning of that Shakespeare play, and that covers Richard II. The bad king, about his like usurpation, and then Henry IV talks of, that's when Henry IV is John of Gaunt's son, and that covers like his reign and stuff. But anyway, so we've got Daddy's first and second family have been on the throne ever since. So
lasting legacy.
And that's kind of where we leave. Like, what do you do about him? Because is he worse than any other man? I mean, was he particularly worse?
I don't think so. I mean, again, just hearing from what I heard, like he's not anymore. I mean, I understand that the conditions again, when you're talking about social conditions and like again the Black Death, like you're
kind of at the wrong place at the wrong
right. It like makes it into like instant pot. Like,
Well,
it's
there's
like,
an air fryer, if you will.
yeah, but it's just like everything is like magnified. So like if the Black Death hadn't been around, like, yeah, you would have been a rich royal. Like, that doesn't mean it's necessarily great. Like, obviously the feudal system horrible, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, is
Is he particularly worse now? I think yeah, it's kind of like if you look at like King, oh my god, oh like Louis the 16th, like is he worse than any of the other
kings,
kings before?
right?
I'm like, no,
Living in luxury and
yeah,
apple
no, but I can see why John of Gaunt doesn't play well for our current times, and he has a really mixed reputation compared like even the Black Prince. He's like the ideal like medieval knight, brutal,
right.
but that's
Right.
kind
He's
of
like, oh, he won battles. He's that like
yeah.
doing like that excite like
But then
fighting,
also
basically fighting for his country while John is just kind of living off of his country.
yeah, and but it does help John that like once his legitimate and illegitimate families get on the throne, as the founder of the dynasty, he gets a little bit of shine. So that's where like he has gotten a better reputation, but yeah, so yeah, his brother was beloved at the time and still gets like that good reputation for being like a good knight, hot brutal knight. But yeah, in more recent times, like I said there at the beginning, there's the book Catherine, which rehabilitates his image with like a modern generation and turns him into the romantic hero. It's from the 1950s, so it's not Outlander level of steamy.
Oh,
So,
come on.
but I'm surprised. I'm actually like really surprised nobody's turned it into because it is really popular. It's like if you
Really?
look at any like historical, um, like even like just historical books, it's like on the one of the top ones. So I'm really surprised nobody's turned it
If
into like,
you're a Hollywood producer out there listening.
yeah, but I think before the reception of him was like pretty mixed, but when you're the hero of your own like historical romance novel, it kind of turns the tide for you. So
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking. Our first figure that we talked about, John Dudley, he needs his own romance, like historical romance.
You can write that, yeah. I'm not writing a romance novel about Nixon.
No, I don't think
clear.
anybody wants that. No, except for wait, what's Nixon's wife name? I can't remember.
Oh,
Mammy. No, it's not Mammy.
did you say Manny?
I said Mammy. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what. Oh, is it? Oh, Pat Nixon. It's Pat Nixon, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Man.
You're welcome. Oh, this is a shout out to my husband. I do know Richard Nixon's wife's name. But anyway, yeah.
Manny.
But yeah. Anyway, what's your take? Because I will give some sources and things that people can read if they do want to know more about him. But what's your take on John?
I'm actually like really shocked that he was, I guess, even considered. Like, I don't even, I guess, really see him in the gray. I feel like he.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I guess like maybe I'm more of a capitalist than I thought. God, maybe this is bad.
Suddenly,
this is my reputation.
I can see you with like a monocle and like suddenly you turn into like Mr. Monopoly or whatever.
No, I know. I just did, and my only legacy on this podcast so far has been Nixon. Which I did not. Really I did not cheer for Nixon at the end.
You're just being really controversial. Like I even said I was team peasant, And I love John of Gaunt, and even I said I was team peasant.
No, like I totally get that the peasants would be pissed, but I think again it's at who. I think it should have been. I know that he's a kid, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's worked in education, kids can be.
Yeah, he was a shit. He was a little shit, and he turned. I mean, he was eventually usurped because he became a tyrant. So yeah,
Right.
they
So
definitely weren't. Yeah,
it's not that I think John of Gaunt is like a hero. I just don't think like out of looking at that time period and knowing that okay, Black Death's going on.
mm-hmm.
He didn't start feudalism. It's not like something that it's like his legacy of that. I can see why people would be angry with him and be like, we're all dying and you're living in your palaces and you have your mistresses, mistress
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Like I can see the ire and the like hypocrisy and just kind of this figure of
Yeah,
wealth and greed of I can see that. I just don't think there's nothing about him that he particularly started. I mean, he wasn't the one who really suppressed the peasants, was he? I mean,
no, I mean not any more than obviously as a duke you have like your own like sort of feudal lands and people working for you, but
yeah,
not any particular, and not at least it didn't he doesn't seem particularly any more brutal or
right,
anything. But again, yeah, I think he's interesting because one, I think his reputation has gone up and down
yeah,
over the centuries, and two, yeah, he was really disliked in his lifetime. Um, and then yeah, continued to have sort of a mixed reputation. Um,
yeah. And I can see again, especially if your older brother, heir to the throne, he's this basically hot prince fighting.
yeah,
And he kind of gets a pass because he's fighting for
yeah, and he also had his own like side note, like the Black Prince had, like he married like the basically the hottest woman in the country who had like her own scandalous, she had like some really scandalous romance things, and he married her, and so like they had like their own like sort of romance. So they were like the Black Prince was very much
hot babies.
yeah, they were very much the like Kate and William, where it's like we can't possibly say anything bad about them.
Right. They're just this like shining image of like the air and like
Mm-hmm.
so I think I mean it makes sense that the peasants and that the people would use him as like a figurehead. Because again he's part of the monarchy, but he's not the heir. He's wasting
What's the most?
he's wasting money. I mean I think that's the one piece that makes me be a little more hesitant where it's like again in a time when people are dying and again suffering, you're wasting resources trying to fight for a crown that it's not like you lost Castile and you're trying to
No,
get it back.
yeah,
It's essentially like you said, just well I don't have a crown here so I want a crown there.
mm-hmm.
The waste of that life and resources like that seems pointless, and then obviously adding a
Yeah,
tax on top of that, like those two things I can see being like not, but that doesn't certainly help his reputation. I just
no,
think it's so different from people at the time.
yeah,
Egregious enough, I would say, to like call him a villain. Like I would, if I had to do like the scale, I would say like 20%, 15%.
nice. Wow, and I feel like I have to recuse myself because I'm John. Uh to our listeners, I think it was last year or the year before. my husband Matt gave me. I have like one of the last uh coin, like way back when England minted like special like John of Gaunt coins. I think it was in like the 18th century or something like that. So I have a John of Gaunt coin. So that shows you where I'm at in terms of mine. I just find him a fascinating character, and I love the Catherine Swinford of it all. Is what can I say? I love me a romance.
I guess, yeah. Even though it's wait, again, I'm gonna be like Matt. Was she the nanny?
Yeah, she was a governess.
Sorry, governess.
She was a governess.
That
Yeah,
okay, true love, but you're
they were together for decades, and they did get married at the end of their life.
I know,
But
I'm
he
just
is
trying to feel if I was the queen and the king's like, oh yeah, here's our governess who's watching our children, and then also like, and here's my second family with like, I forgot that part is. I mean, but again, I'm other men at that time were not any better, and but I'm especially mad at his dad. His
I know.
dad
Yeah,
could keep it in his pants for a few
no,
right at the end of his life. That
I know. It's like he waited 30 years, and then
villain.
he decided to be a man, and he couldn't do it.
That's what I'm most disappointed in.
I know. There is, if you, well, so to wrap it up, so if you do want more John of Gaunt, and frankly, who doesn't, there's a relatively new season recent biography called The Red Prince. So that's his most recent one. And then again, if you want like the romantic hero, there's it's Anya Seton's Catherine. So it's good. Don't expect Outlander. It's pretty sedate in terms of a romance novel, but it's still good. Yeah, it's still worth reading. And then yeah, if you want to know more about the Peasants' Revolt, uh, there's the Peasant Revolt book by Dan Jones. He's one of my favorite historians. I haven't read that book, but he has a book on like the Plantagenets and some of the other ones that they're all really readable. So they read more like novels. So those are kind of my shout outs. And then, yeah, if you do want to know more about like and he does feature in it, but his dad, uh, and like his family. It's Gemma Holman's The Queen and the Mistress. So it's about Philippa and Alice Pears. That's another book. So and they're also podcasts about we can also put some other podcasts if you want to hear about John of Gaunt. But why would you? Because I just gave you everything. So honestly.
All to know. So thank you, Erin. Yeah, that was
Well,
very.
do you want to bring us home, Jamie?
Sure. So thank you again for everybody who stuck with us through the names and Catherine, remembering who Catherine was. Hopefully now Matt will.
Catherine's and the Edwards and the Richards.
Yep, I know. First with all the names and everything. So thank you for people who are listening. It sounds really cheesy to say subscribe, but we are hoping to do this now weekly, maybe a Monday or Sunday night thing. So the hope would be to post on Tuesdays. So hopefully we'll catch you next Tuesday, and I will try to find somebody whose legacy, if for some reason, again, our podcast, if we shall be, I don't know, not shut down, delayed in any other way. My legacy is not just Nixon.
Nixon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else are you gonna? What other monster are you gonna try to rehabilitate next time?
No.
TV.
Oh, I don't know. Like I said, I'm thinking of like leaning back into early, Jamie love. Well, not love, but interest of with Henry VIII.
Ooh,
Just
love it already.
Yeah. So I think that would be an interesting one. And then, especially if you're going to bring in one of the wives, but we will let you guys get to hear that next week. So thank you for listening. don't sleep with the nanny men out there. And another fun fact, again, Manny is not Nixon's wife's name. Like, those are, I think, some key learnings.
There are some key ones. All right, bye guys.
Bye.